Dark chosen ones, this is why you suffer first, then get chosen. You don't just wake up one day and get chosen. You don't get handed divine purpose, soul fire, or supernatural clarity without first being emptied. You suffer first. You break first. You fall before you rise, not because you're weak, but because the old version of you cannot carry the weight of what you're here to do. If you are a dark chosen one, then you already know this, even if you've never had the words for it. You felt the isolation. You've endured the betrayals. You've stared into the void and asked, "Why me?" more times than you can count. But here's the truth hidden within that question. You were being prepared. You were being initiated, and the suffering was not the end. It was the beginning of something holy, a story that no one else could live but you.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
When God marks a soul for greatness, He does not start with blessings. He starts with stripping. He doesn't first give you power, He gives you pressure. Why? Because the version of you that was shaped by the world must die before the version of you that was shaped by eternity can be born. That's why you suffered first. The pain is the fire that burns away who you were never meant to be. And it's brutal. It's disorienting. It makes you question your own worth, your own sanity, your own purpose. It makes you feel like the universe has forgotten you. But the truth is, the universe was watching you. God was watching you, watching how you responded when everything was taken, watching who you became when no one was looking, watching the choices you made when you had nothing left to prove, because that's when your real self begins to emerge. Chosen ones are not born into ease. They are born into trials. They are handed pain not as punishment, but as refinement. And if you've been through extended seasons of suffering, it's likely because your calling is just as extended. Because the deeper the pain, the higher the purpose. And the darkness you've endured, it wasn't random. It was precise. It was a divine curriculum coded for your exact soul contract. And it was meant to do one thing: awaken you. Not gently, not politely, but violently, truthfully, permanently. Because the chosen ones are not being prepared for a gentle life. They are being prepared to shake the world awake. But let's talk about the mechanics of why you suffer first. First, it's energetic. Your soul carries a frequency that is incompatible with this current dimension's illusions. That incompatibility creates friction both within and around you. You attract difficult people, harsh lessons, and impossible situations not because you're cursed, but because your soul is trying to burn through density at a rate that most people will never understand. You are trying to rise while still wearing chains. And so the universe brings you situations that break the chains. And yes, that hurts. It's supposed to. Because freedom isn't painless. It's surgical. It's the cutting away of every lie you inherited, every mask you were taught to wear, every identity that was never yours to begin with. Second, it's emotional. You suffer first because your emotional body is the gateway to your spiritual body. You feel more than others. You see more. You're affected by things that others brush off. That's not weakness. That's capacity. God gave you a bigger emotional container so you could hold more light, but to do that, you had to first feel all the darkness. And that's why your emotional pain has felt unbearable at times, because it wasn't just yours. You were clearing ancestral trauma. You were breaking generational cycles. You were transmuting collective suffering. You were doing the work of 10 lifetimes in one. And no one told you. No one warned you. Because this is the path of the dark chosen ones. It is walked in silence. It is mastered in solitude. And it is understood only by the soul. Third, it's spiritual. You suffer first because your spirit must be tested. Not by God's cruelty, but by divine law. Power without purification is dangerous. Influence without integrity is deadly. So before you are given vision, you are given void. Before you are given authority, you are given emptiness. Before you are given divine insight, you are given divine silence. And in that silence, everything false in you screams. Your ego panics. Your fears surface. Your addictions rise. And one by one, you must face them. Not just once, but again and again. Until you no longer react from your wound, but respond from your wisdom. Until you no longer fight for validation, but stand in revelation. Until you no longer seek the light, you become it. So if you're watching this and wondering why you've been through so much, this is why. You are being shaped, molded, refined. You are being stretched beyond comfort because your calling will require it. You are being emptied not to be left hollow, but to be filled with something eternal. And the moment you stop resisting the suffering and start listening to it, everything begins to change. You begin to see the pattern, or the precision, the divine fingerprints in the chaos. You begin to realize that your pain was never in vain, it was initiation. Not everyone gets this. Not everyone can hold this frequency. But you can, because you were built for it. Now I want to ask you something that might crack your entire identity open. What if your suffering wasn't a detour, but the fastest path to your destiny? What if everything you thought was delaying your purpose was actually activating it? What if the very things you begged God to take away were the exact things He used to make you? Because here's the truth: God doesn't choose the comfortable. He chooses the ready. And readiness doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being purified, and purification always begins with pain. But here's the twist. Once you've suffered long enough, deeply enough, honestly enough, something begins to shift. You begin to see differently. You start noticing that the same things that used to destroy you now empower you. The triggers become teachers. The betrayals become blueprints. The wounds become weapons of light. And this is where the choosing begins. After you've suffered, after you've been emptied, after you've been stripped, then you are chosen. Not just because you survived, but because you stayed awake. You didn't numb out. You didn't sell out. You didn't give up. You remained. And that endurance, that sacred defiance of your soul, is what marks you as ready. Ready to be used, ready to be seen, ready to be sent. This choosing is not glamorous. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with an announcement. It arrives quietly, like a whisper you can't explain, like a fire that doesn't go out. Suddenly you realize you are no longer waiting for permission. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are no longer apologizing for your fire. You know who you are, and that knowing becomes your compass. It becomes your weapon. It becomes your ministry. And from that place, your life becomes something else entirely. It becomes a signal, a call to others who are still in the fire, still in the void, still in the dark. Your healing becomes their hope. Your presence becomes their proof. And your suffering becomes sacred because it served something greater than you. The divine flip, how your deepest suffering becomes the exact reason you're unstoppable. There's a moment so quiet, so unassuming that it almost slips past you unnoticed. It's not marked by fireworks or fanfare or divine visions. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it is the most powerful turning point of all. It's the moment when your suffering stops being a source of shame and starts becoming a source of strength. It's the moment when the pain that once broke you becomes the foundation you now stand on. This is the divine flip, the sacred reversal, the hidden law of spiritual transformation that says, what once hurt you the most will become the very thing that makes you unstoppable. But you don't get to this moment by bypassing the pain. You get to it by walking through it completely, by sitting in it, listening to it, letting it change you at the cellular level. And when you stop resisting your suffering and begin to extract its wisdom, you unlock something that no one can ever take from you again: resonant spiritual authority. You see, the world is full of people who talk about healing, awakening, purpose, but there's something different about someone who's lived it. You can feel it. You can't fake it. That kind of energy doesn't come from information. It comes from initiation. That's what sets the dark chosen ones apart. You're not here because you memorized the right affirmations or read the right books. You're here because you bled truth. You lost everything. You died inside, and you came back wiser, stronger, more aligned, and most importantly, more real. And that realness is your superpower. That's what people feel when you walk into a room. That's why strangers open up to you. That's why your presence activates others. You carry the frequency of someone who's been through fire and didn't lose their soul. But let's take this deeper. Why does suffering become your source of strength? Because suffering is the only thing that forces you to meet your real self. When everything is going well, when you're winning, when the world is clapping, it's easy to perform, to maintain the mask. But when life strips you to nothing, when there's no one to impress, when there's no external reward, that's when your truth shows up. That's when you find out who you are without the praise, without the approval, without the illusion. And let's be honest, most people run from that moment. They medicate it, avoid it, distract themselves. But you stayed, you felt it all. And that's what made you different. That's what made you ready. Because only those who have met themselves in the dark can carry the light without becoming arrogant or disconnected. Only those who have touched their own shadows can hold space for others without judgment. That's spiritual maturity. That's embodied wisdom. And that's the kind of frequency the world is starving for. Now here's where it gets powerful. Once you've transmuted your pain into purpose, you become immune to the things that used to destroy you. The triggers that once paralyzed you, they become reminders of how far you've come. The wounds that once bled endlessly, they become sacred tattoos that speak of your survival. The people who once rejected you, they lose all power over your identity. Why? Because you no longer source your worth externally. You know who you are. You've earned it. And from that place, you move through life with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove anything. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be liked. You just exist in alignment. And that alignment is magnetic. People don't know why they're drawn to you, but they are. Because energy doesn't lie. And your energy says, I've suffered, I've healed, I've remembered who I am, and now I walk in it. So let's ask the question that most avoid. What if the thing you're still running from is the path to everything you've been praying for? What if your fear of facing the past, of feeling the grief, of remembering the betrayal is actually blocking the door to your next level? Because here's the brutal and beautiful truth. The only way out is through. There's no shortcut. There's no bypass. There's only depth. And the deeper you go into your pain, the higher you rise in your purpose. That's the divine flip. That's the paradox of being chosen. You suffer to gain access. You break to become whole. You are emptied so you can be filled with something divine. And when that flip happens, when you stop seeing your suffering as a curse and start seeing it as currency, you become a force of nature. You no longer beg for doors to open. You become the door. You no longer wait for opportunities. You create them. You no longer seek validation. You embody truth. And from that place, your life accelerates. Not because you're striving, but because you're aligned. Things begin to move. People show up, resources appear, and you realize it wasn't about effort. It was about frequency, and your frequency is finally clean. It's finally true. It's finally you. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be honest enough to feel your way through the fire. Because the fire doesn't just burn, it refines. And what's left after the fire? Not your ego, not your performance, not your conditioning. What's left is your essence, your soul, your divine blueprint. And that blueprint is encoded with everything you need to fulfill your mission. You're not missing anything. You're not behind. You're not broken. You are becoming. And your suffering was the sacred catalyst for that becoming. So don't rush to escape the pain. Don't rush to fix it. Ask it what it came to teach you. Ask it what it's trying to unlock, because within every wound is a gift. Within every breakdown is a blueprint. Within every shadow is a seed of light. And once you harvest those seeds, once you plant them with intention and water them with truth, your life will never be the same. You won't just survive your suffering. You'll use it. You'll speak from it. You'll lead with it. You'll walk into rooms and shift the atmosphere, not because you're trying to be powerful, but because you've become power. And that's why the dark chosen ones suffer first. Because we're not just here to live, we're here to wake the world up. And to do that, we must first wake ourselves. Through pain, through fire, through divine reversal, through the holy alchemy of becoming who we were always meant to be. The final shift, how to walk in your chosen identity and change lives without saying a word. There comes a moment in the journey of every dark chosen one when the war ends. Not because the world stops throwing chaos at you, not because the external pressure disappears, but because you stop resisting who you've become. And when that happens, when you finally accept your true form, when you finally realize that your suffering didn't break you, but it built you, something divine locks into place inside of you. Not a belief, not a thought, but a knowing, a soul deep remembering that you are not here by accident. You are not the result of random pain or meaningless trauma. You are coded for transformation. You are designed for remembrance. And the moment you step into that awareness fully, without hesitation, without apology, without needing anyone to understand, you undergo the final shift. From seeker to signal. From survivor to living transmission. You stop speaking from pain and start radiating from power. And your presence alone becomes medicine. This is the part of the journey that no one teaches you how to handle. Because it's not about doing anymore. It's about being. It's about becoming the embodiment of all the healing, all the revelation, all the fire you walked through. No more needing to explain your worth. No more shrinking to make others comfortable. No more trying to convince anyone of your truth. You become silent thunder. You walk into a room and the atmosphere changes, not because you're loud, but because your frequency is undeniable. You've purified your field through suffering. You've refined your soul through surrender. And now, without saying a word, you're felt. And that feeling opens hearts. It shifts timelines. It activates codes in the people around you that they didn't even know they carried. That's the power of final alignment. That's what it means to be chosen. But let's be clear, this final shift is not glamorous. It's not about being famous. It's not about building a brand or getting followers. It's about impact. It's about knowing that just your existence is a form of prayer. That your alignment is a message. That your healing is a ripple effect. And when you walk in that truth, you no longer need permission to lead. You no longer wait for the perfect moment. You become the moment. Everything you touch carries intention. Every word you speak is infused with presence. Every choice you make is a reflection of divine intelligence flowing through a human body that has been tempered by fire. And that's why people trust you, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because you've been through the dark and came out with your soul intact. And here's the secret no one tells you. Once you walk in your full chosen identity, you don't need to force anything. You don't need to chase. You don't need to beg for opportunities or visibility. The universe begins to rearrange itself around your frequency. The right people find you. The right doors open. The right moments align, not because you're hustling, but because you're in integrity. You're in flow. You're in resonance with your divine path. And that path is no longer a mystery. It's no longer a question mark. It's a pulse. a rhythm you feel in your bones, a direction you don't need to explain to anyone because you know it's not coming from your mind, it's coming from your soul. So, what does it look like to change lives without saying a word? It looks like being so grounded in your truth that your energy speaks louder than your language. It looks like walking into a space and people breathing easier without knowing why. It looks like someone encountering your presence and suddenly remembering a piece of themselves they forgot. It looks like being a mirror, not for ego, but for identity. You don't tell people who they are, you just stand so fully in who you are that it reflects back to them what's possible. And that's the most powerful form of leadership in existence. Not control, not charisma, but authentic frequency. Now here's the most important part. This level of spiritual embodiment is not a peak, it's a practice. It's not a finish line, it's a devotion. Every day you choose alignment over ego. Every day you choose truth over performance. Every day you choose presence over distraction. And that daily choice is what keeps your vessel clean, your signal strong, and your path open. Because even now, after all the transformation, the world will still try to pull you back into the noise, into the fear, into the illusion. But you now carry the awareness that you are not here to fit in with the world is recalibrating to fit around you. And so I ask you, right now, in this moment of sacred reflection, are you willing to live a life that is so true, so aligned, so unshakably rooted in your divine identity that it becomes your legacy? Not because of what you said, not because of what you achieved, but because of the energy you carried, because of the truth you never compromised, because of the light you held, even when it was inconvenient. That is the calling of the dark chosen ones, not to be worshipped, but to remind others they are divine too. Not to escape the world, but to rewrite it from within. Not to avoid suffering, but to alchemize it into sacred service. You suffered first because you were meant to lead in a way no one else can. You got chosen after because the fire proved what you were made of. And now you walk. Now you speak only when it's necessary. Now you move only when it's guided. Now you rest in the knowing that you don't need to be anything other than what you already are. A living frequency of divine truth shaped by pain, refined by fire, and chosen by design.